If we look at the Dharmic traditions of India compared with the Judeo-Christian religions, there are stark contrasts in certain theological principles. Western religion has clear distinctions between God, man, and the world. Hinduism and other Dharmic religions, however, hold philosophies that see some kind of unity between the three. But how has this important distinction come about? From a scriptural perspective, this can all be traced back to perhaps the most ancient and profoundest texts in human history, the Upanishads. Whilst many Hindus might have heard of them, few have really engaged with them in any meaningful way. As the great philosopher Schopenhauer declared, the Upanishads are the most elevated and satisfying read possible in the world. It has been the solace of my life and will be the solace of my death. Many other Western thinkers have echoed the same. Whether you are a Vaishnava Hindu, a Shaivite, a Shakta, or even a Buddhist or Sikh, the Upanishads would have undoubtedly played some role in shaping your philosophy. In this video, we'll walk through some of the statements of the Upanishads and see what conclusions they come to. First of all, these texts are found at the end of each of the 4 Vedas. They are known as Vedanta, which means the end or rather the conclusion of Vedic teaching. While the earlier parts of the Veda are dedicated to ritual practice, the Upanishads are dedicated to gaining spiritual knowledge. They do not put down rules we should follow, but rather they lay down universal truths that govern all of life. There are 10, perhaps 12 principal Upanishads, with many other authored much later. The main subject discussed is metaphysics, which means the foundational principles of reality. They investigate questions such as, who am I? And what is the highest principle that exists? The Upanishads start with a blank slate. They take nothing for granted and come to conclusions based on the revelation of ancient seers. These teachings often play out through conversations, debates, and stories. If we turn to the Kena Upanishad, a disciple asks his master, "Commanded and directed by whom does the mind go towards its objects? Commanded by whom does this life force move? At whose will do men utter speech? What power directs the eye and the ear?" The disciple is asking, how is it that thoughts can arise in our mind? How are we able to move and talk? What is making this thing called life even possible? This question cuts straight to the fundamentals. Well before Western scientists, the rishis of India were already investigating the nature of consciousness. In another Upanishad, known as the Brihadaranyaka, it is answered in this way. You cannot see the seer of seeing. You cannot hear the hearer of hearing. You cannot think of the thinker of thinking. You cannot know the knower of knowing. This is yourself that is within all. Everything else but this is perishable. In other words, consciousness is not a product of this material world. It cannot be perceived by the senses of the body. Yet it is the thing by which the senses themselves function. Whereas some scientists would advocate that the brain might somehow create consciousness, the Upanishads emphatically declare that consciousness is not material. It resides in an altogether different space untouched by this world. It is the unchanging aspect of who we are. It is the self, or the Atman. But how can we perceive our true self? What are the barriers that prevent this realization? The Taittiriya Upanishad takes us on a path of inquiry to discover that eternal part of who we are. The Annamaya Kosha forms our gross, physical body which is constantly changing and decaying. Beneath this is prana, or life force, which governs our energy. Going further, there is the Manomaya Kosha, or our mind with its constant stream of thoughts. Deeper still is the Vijnanamaya Kosha, which allows us to understand and discriminate in the world. But even beneath this, there is a realm which is blissful and full of boundless joy. This is the Anandamaya Kosha, and it is around here where we can find the Atman. The 5 koshas make us aware that beyond all the levels of who we are, there is something foundational which is witnessing, knowing, and experiencing everything. But as the sage Yajnavalkya points out, this Atman is not limited to one body. He described in the Brihadaranyaka, as a caterpillar, after reaching a blade of grass, approaches another, so too does this self, after having thrown off this body, it draws itself to another. What a man turns out to be depends on his actions. If he is good, he will turn into something good. If he is bad, he will turn into something bad. Many scholars state that this is the first ever reference to reincarnation and karma. Thousands of years ago, the rishis declared that the self, which is pure consciousness, is encased in material reality. Just like the caterpillar, it moves from one body to another, and its fate in the next life is decided by the deeds that have been done. These three major doctrines, the divinity of the self, reincarnation, and karma, are what define Hinduism as a whole. But there is more. Now that we understand who we are, what about this world around? Amongst all this creation, what is the ultimate thing behind it? The Chandogya Upanishad states, all of this is Brahman. Everything comes from Brahman, everything goes back to Brahman, and everything is sustained by Brahman. The ultimate principle, according to the Upanishads, is literally everything. It is the source and the ground upon which all of creation exists. The world full of people, animals, trees, and other living beings, all of it is Brahman. The various Upanishads state, Brahman is Sat, existence which is unchanging. It is Chit, or consciousness, and it is Ananda, infinitely blissful. But if Brahman is everything, then where exactly do we as the Atman fit in? In the Chandogya Upanishad, there is the story of Svetaketu. Having returned from 12 years of education and filled with some pride, he meets his father Uddalaka Aruni. Keen to educate his son, Uddalaka asks him to bring a fruit from a banyan tree. Then he instructs him to cut it and asks, "What do you see?" "Exquisitely small seeds." "Can you break one of them?" "I have split it." "Then what do you see?" "I see nothing at all." "Son, can this marvel of a tree come out of nothing? It is just that you are not able to see the subtle essence in the seed from which this banyan tree has sprung. That which is the subtle essence is the bedrock of all existence. Dear boy, that which is the finest essence the whole universe has as its soul. That is reality. That is the self. And Tattvamasi, that is you, Svetaketu. Uddalaka Aruni is stating that this Brahman, which underpins everything, is actually us. Our essential nature as the self is the same thing that pervades all creation. Or to put it more precisely, Atman is Brahman. But the Upanishadic statements which declare the unity of Atman and Brahman are just one side of the coin. There are numerous statements which make it clear that there are differences between the two. The Mundaka Upanishad describes two birds sitting in a tree. One bird eats the sweet fruit, the other looks on without eating. Similarly, on this same tree, the soul too is drowned, it is perplexed, and it is grieving owing to helplessness. But when he sees the other, the Lord who is worshipped in all his glory, he becomes absolved from grief. In this scene, we as the Atman are the bird that is attached to this world, and alongside us is the Isha or Lord. It states that by knowing the Lord, we can be free from suffering. Despite the clear unity in other verses, the two birds show a clear difference between Atman and Brahman. The Svetaketu Upanishad is even clearer. There are two, one the knowing who is the Lord, and the other ignorant who is the soul. There is the ruler and the ruled. It is these apparently conflicting statements that make the Upanishads open to interpretation. Some advocate an absolute unity between man, God, and the world, whereas others put forward a clear difference. But there are some verses that seem to reconcile these two opposing views. In the Brihadaranyaka, Sage Yajnavalkya declares that he who dwells in this earth and within the earth, whom the earth does not know, whose body the earth is, he is also yourself, the ruler within and immortal. Yajnavalkya explains that creation and the various souls are the body of Brahman, and Brahman itself is beyond, ruling everything from within. So much like a body is different from the soul, but overall makes up one person, so too the world and living beings are distinct, but overall are still part of the oneness that is Brahman. The great Vedantins, Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva all emphasize different statements of the Upanishads to validate their view of reality. Shankara focuses on those of absolute oneness, stating the differences we perceive are ultimately an illusion. Madhva emphasizes the statements that speak of absolute difference. Ramanuja, however, reconciles the two. Whilst agreeing that Brahman is all there is, he states that within this overall oneness there are distinctions. The souls and the world are part of Brahman's body. Ramanuja and numerous other theistic philosophers rely on the Upanishads to lay down the structural vision of reality. But it is in the Bhagavad Gita where we see the full personal nature of God. Here, the Brahman of the Upanishads is revealed as none other than Lord Krishna. The Puranas, such as the Bhagavatam, go even further and illustrate through the many pastimes of Krishna what a devotional relationship with Brahman looks like. The full nature of ecstatic divine love is built on the philosophical principles of the Upanishads. Devotion, therefore, is not some sentimental, ungrounded state. The loving relationship between God and devotee is constructed on the rational metaphysical inquiry of the ancient rishis. The Upanishads are the bedrock of all Hindu thought. Whether it is yoga, meditation, or temple worship, all of it has in some way come from these scriptures. Fundamentally, the rishis have made it clear we are divine beings and we can all experience this firsthand. It is this possibility of self-realization that so radically distinguishes the Dharmic traditions of India from Western religion. While there have been many mystics throughout history, it is only the Upanishads which have consolidated this mysticism into actual philosophy. The Upanishads show us that through inquiry into our own existence, we can know the magnitude of truth, and from there we can know the glory of God. Many thanks for listening.